Здравия желания, YouTube land товарищи. So, I apologize. I hate when people record stuff while driving, but honestly, I just don't have the time to do this at home. Just got back from Red Divide 4, and then I have to get ready for Cochise Green. And I also have work and have stuff to do at home when I get home from work. So I guess I'm gonna try to squeeze this in between home and work on the drive. Red Divide 4 finally happened, despite being rescheduled from April. So this is not what the organizers had in mind originally. They were not anticipating all that heat for us to be going up and down all those hills on. But despite all the heat, I think it was a great time. Perhaps the heat added to it, maybe like the Adriatic Mediterranean heat of Yugoslavia, so more Milsim. I think perhaps there was too much Milsim because I felt like other attendees were not as thrilled, not as happy with the event as I was. I was definitely liking it much more than Red Divide 3. The area of operation seemed much more vast. We were really spread out. It's not like we were a hop and a skip away from the NATO camp. Or maybe it was just the feeling that we weren't close because we had to go up and down these valleys in the heat, and it was just so damn exhausting and took so long. But no, I want to say that we definitely utilized more of the AO. As far as Panthera Training Center, I've done the first Milsim West Saratov event there, and I was a little disappointed. I felt like maybe there was too much emphasis on the mount, and we were kind of stuck in the same areas. But at this event, we were still using the same areas, but it didn't feel like we were stuck in the same areas. Going out on the missions, like we were on the same points of interest, same roads, but we spent more time off the roads, which made it seem like we were experiencing more of the field. I enjoyed this event because it felt very Milsim. And kids just think Milsim, well, that's where you just put on a uniform and get the right replica gun and you just pew pew pew. But that's not the case. Milsim is you're simulating military. It has a lot of boring stuff to simulate. I personally experienced maybe 2 actual fire engagements. Only shot in one of those fire engagements. Over the weekend, that feels like very little. And I can understand that being a frustration for attendees that don't really have a firm grasp of Milsim. I heard guys in camp like, oh, I'm glad I didn't bring my shovel. Well, you were doing it wrong, because I brought my shovel and I used it when I was making our defensive position. I definitely saw the East Germans using their shovels. So you're not packing your shovel, you're not doing Milsim right. Because guess what? In the Army, you bring stuff you don't end up using. And I personally like it when I bring stuff and I do actually get to use it. Definitely feel like I get more of my money's worth in a full experience when I spend my money on all this kit that I'm supposed to have and then I actually use the kit. I did my digging. I did my pooping in the woods. I did a whole lot of hurry up and wait. I did suddenly changing my role because I was just a basic soldat, desantnik, and then I got bumped up to section leader. Like the first evening, I had come into this thinking this was going to be an easy one for me. This is going to be one of those events where I don't have to worry about being in daddy mode and being responsible for other people. And then suddenly, without any warning, it's like, hey Roman, grab your section. Roman, this is what your section's gonna be doing. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'm section leader now. I feel bad for the other guy, you know, like how does he must feel suddenly leadership that was assigned to him is deferred to me. You know, I just am feeling sympathetic towards that. But you know, leadership is thrust upon you. You grab it and you do the best you can with it. That's what I did. Служу Советскому Союзу. I feel that the level of intensity for this event was appropriate considering the limitations of the participants. These guys, including myself, are not in the best of shape. And this was hot weather, sunny hot weather, despite what the forecast was promising. And a lot of going up and down hills. And the Warsaw Pact side did not have any vehicles. So if we needed to get around, we had to foot it. Our feet were exhausted. We did a lot of sweating, a lot. There was a point where Zach and I were sitting down back at camp, and I'm just watching droplets of sweat dripping from his head. Like I was doing something, and suddenly I see droplets of water landing like on his leg, and that was from his head. Really shouldn't have in retrospect, because who knows if I would have startled a guy with a real firearm ready to go. That was probably bad. But instinctively, like, I want to have my gun up. Like, if I'm up here, it's more than a game. I'm in the simulation. So I'm laying in the bush, spread eagle, with the rifle pointed out between my legs. And this truck passes and then stops, and then he starts backing up. I'm like, oh no, did he notice us? Is he coming in to investigate? Backs up, backs up, backs up. Ooh, it's tense. And then he starts driving slowly again. It's like, is he actually looking for us? But then he just drives off, continues, and he's gone. It's like, that was exciting. Not even part of the game, but that was exciting. And that was like real, like, simulation part, but it was completely unplanned from the event. It's like, it was part of the event, but completely separate from the event. Get back on the road, start marching towards the town again. Another car's coming. This time, less bushes. We're much more in the open, and we just all jump off to the left. I think all of us jumped off to the left. We're in the ditch, and I'm just kind of next to a tiny little bush, and I'm just like, if I stand still, they don't notice me. This guy also drives by, didn't notice us. Yes. Who's a bush? I'm a bush. Who's a bush? I'm a bush. Real разведчики type of stuff, like staying out of sight, avoiding being spotted. Exciting stuff like that. Stuff like that I love. That is the stuff that we had to do, like in East Wind. We would have to avoid getting spotted, and it was exciting. So we're avoiding contact, even if these guys weren't part of the event. It's just the action of doing all this stuff is so exciting and thrilling. It's not like we just, oh, here comes a vehicle, everyone just get to the side of the road, let the vehicle pass. And you know, like a typical airsoft event that has to deal with vehicles on the road. And you know, that helps set it apart. That was fun. So we arrived to the mount, well, just on the edge of it, the edge of the town that's being held by NATO. And we have to do recon because later that night, there's going to be a raid, early morning raid on the town. So they need intel on what's in the town. So we go in to observe. I got a 1PN58 on my AKS 74N, and Zach has one also. So we get on top of a hill to do observation, and in the woods that night the scopes were not ideal. So these scopes are great for what we were doing that night on the hill though. I was able to see beyond what my eyes could see in the dark, which is what these scopes are supposed to do. Like there was enough moonlight and other ambient light to be able to see stuff, but not enough stuff and not far enough. So this is where the scopes were actually useful. We do our observations, like, okay, there's this many lights there at these locations. Are there patrols happening? How are we hearing activity, or is it all quiet? You know, how is their light discipline? How's their sound discipline? You know, that type of stuff that is actionable that we can report. Like, how were we able to get in? Did they notice us coming? These are the things we can report on. So originally I was thinking we'd be there minimum an hour, maybe hour and a half, do observations. So if like there were any change in shifts, we would know and we could record it. But we were so exhausted, and after I did my initial observations, I told them to keep observing, and I just laid back in the tall grass on the hill, and I was gone. Until I hear some rustling, and I wake up, and it was Drake. He's like, yeah, I found him. I was just following the snoring. So, lucky for us, you know, no one else was following the snoring. So we were there for probably a half hour or so. So not as long as I wanted to, but the guys, if I was this exhausted, I'm sure the guys were even more exhausted. And we still needed to hump all the way back to our camp and not get lost again. So we get going. We are leaving the mount, and a signal flare goes up, or illumination flare. It was a white light, not red, so it's probably illuminate. It meant to be for illumination, but it didn't stay in the air. It kind of just like landed somewhere inside the mount. And my thought was, oh, they probably heard us leaving. They probably heard our footfalls like echoing across the big open area. But it's too late. Don't think they see us. We heard voices. So let's just get out of here. We shouldn't be engaging anyway. We're almost out of sight from the mount anyway. Let's keep going. So we eventually made it back, and I make my debriefing. I talk to them, I tell them, all right, there were like 3 lights. They were at these locations. It sounded like there was at least 2 people on the second floor of the little Connex fortress over there. We saw a red light go off on the far porch. Otherwise, there wasn't any chatting. There wasn't anyone walking around with white light. And you know, describe the route we took to get in there. And then and our commander Vince is telling us about the night raid, and I'm like, no, no, we are done. We are too exhausted. You're gonna have to go on that mission without us. We need to recoup. We need to sleep. I felt bad because I want to experience everything. I want to get all the experiences that happen at an event. I want to get as much out of it for what I paid, but I would only be dragging my comrades down if I was to attend at this state. And no way would 1 or 2 hours get me up and ready to be able to do stuff on that night raid and then to be able to get up in the morning and do stuff during the day. No. So that's Milsim. We didn't fire any shots. This was the first real mission my section went out on. It was great. It was great. I know a different section went out and they did other razviedka stuff, which includes setting up a bunch of mines and stuff. So there was other people doing other missions. We weren't all doing the same thing at the same time. So the guys that got to set up ordnance, they didn't fire any shots, but they did do Milsim stuff as we were simulating the 345 разведчики. They set up booby traps. That's what they did. So let's talk about Saturday. All right, got my sleep. Ended up waking around maybe 6:20 in the morning because I didn't have enough energy the night before to inflate my special dozhd. It's like a plush palatka, but it's actually made out of rubber, and you can inflate it like an air mattress, and it's really cool. But after that last night mission, I just didn't have the strength to actually inflate it and use it. So I ended up just laying on it like a pillow. Where we were sleeping, we dug out a little, we put up branches and made a barrier so that we kind of had like a blind. We had ourselves a little hide, me and Zach, with a firing hole and just enough room for the two of us to lay out and get our sleep in. You know, it's that kind of stuff that makes it a little Milsim. That's how you get that Milsim, by doing Milsim stuff. We didn't have to be told by our leadership to do that specifically. It was understood. You know, this is gonna be our camp for at least the night, and we have to prepare ourselves for it accordingly, just in case. What if NATO does find us? Too tired to utilize that bit of super special equipment that I had, so end up waking up around 6:20, 6:30 in the morning because I'm just so freaking cold. I mean, it was only like in the probably mid-60s at that point, but spending all that hours on the ground, that'll take an effect on you. I don't recommend it. Afterwards, I'm called to a briefing. Apparently, one of the other sections had some sort of mission where they were supposed to find a cache of supplies. They failed to do so, and the way for us to get that supplies today was in the scenario we're going to raid a humanitarian checkpoint. The US Army is handing out UN supplies, humanitarian supplies, and in the scenario we are a unit that is essentially cut off, akin to early World War II for the Soviets, where a lot of guys were stuck in these cauldrons, surrounded by the enemy, but not defeated, and trying to avoid contact, but running out of supplies because they're cut off. So we were cut off, running out of supplies. This was an opportunity for us to get some precious food and other supplies. So in the story, we are to raid this checkpoint. And in the morning, it's Roman, get your section. Your section is going to go out and do this mission. And again, I was thinking that, okay, now it's my section. I thought that maybe that was just for the night mission, but apparently I have it officially taken over, because in the daytime it was my section also. And then they tell us, take the Yugos with you. So there's a section of Yugoslavians, the JNA, Yugoslavian National Army. I believe they were portraying some border units that were also displaced, and they had joined the Warsaw Pact in fighting off the invader NATO. So I get briefed on the mission. I start gathering my forces, and then a bunch of East Germans are rolling in with us, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're not part of my mission. I'm like, oh yeah, they told us we are. I'm like, okay. So apparently the East Germans are also coming. So now we have one Soviet section, one East German section, and a whole bunch of Yugoslavians. So something simple got inflated into something really big. So I'm beginning to think that, okay, I guess maybe this mission is going to be a little more complicated than I had thought. Perhaps there's going to be a full NATO unit we have to deal with. Like, maybe it's going to be at least the Humvee with the Deuce, all packed to the brim with units to provide security for this humanitarian checkpoint. I set the guys up for a Soviet appropriate parallel ambush situation. And one of these younger attendees on the Soviet side makes some snarky remarks about using parallel ambush. That takes me aback, because you signed up to portray a Soviet unit. You got all the kit to portray a Soviet разведчик. Why are you talking crap about using Soviet tactics? That bothered me. But I didn't have time to deal with this participant's maladjusted disposition. Continued on the mission, set everyone up for the ambush, covered all the different contingencies for this ambush, operating under the concept that it will likely be at least 2 vehicles. We had hide guys on an elevated position, go over with my Yugoslavian leader that he's going to be the one triggering the ambush and what are the criteria to open fire. And I take the Soviet group, which is all airsoft, while the Yugoslavians and the East Germans are nearly entirely all blank fire. So the airsoft Soviet section is off the road in a decline, hidden in the tree line, where our KMLK suits are quite effective. Berezka camouflage is working wonderfully there. Time hack was for about 10 in the morning. So if they don't show up by 10, we're supposed to head back home, back to base, our camp. So we are waiting and waiting. We have enough time for some of us to catch up on our naps from being exhausted last night and barely getting any sleep in the morning. I have time to take a tactical poop in the woods. Even have time to do some recon for our exfil route. About about halfway back to camp, we stopped for a hydration break because there was a water cache. And over there, while we're recuperating, re-upping on water, we're told to expect a attack, that the NATO has ascertained our position and they are going to make a push on us. We need to dig in where we are. We start making preparations to fight in our current positions. We forward position the Yugoslavians. Germans start digging in. The Polish unit takes a different position, so we're kind of in an L shape. While we're doing defense in depth, Soviets are taking a deeper defensive position. We're all getting ready to do this, and then we get word that NATO doesn't have the strength to take us on. They are not going to be pushing on us. So then we get ready for what will end up being our final mission of the event. We will be assaulting the mount. I was really hoping to avoid urban combat, even though that's the central draw of this field. But to make it interesting, we're actually going to have a captured deuce that is going to take us outside the AO and reposition us in a back position, like behind the enemy line, so that we could take the hill behind them and attack from there. Similarly to how they did their raid the previous night. Except that one was all on foot. Little do we know that NATO is actually observant and not mentally challenged. So they see, first they hear the deuce, then they see the deuce on the highway going around the facility, and they deduce that Soviet units are simply repositioning in their rear for a offensive, which is exactly what we're doing. And we end up having to reposition in multiple trips of the deuce. So we're there for a while, once again in the sun, and being observed by the enemy. Because at this point, we are even aware that, well, outside the game, in meta, there was already a drone flying over and observing us in our gathering position. Womp, womp, womp. It's strange birds in Yugoslavia. So, even if they didn't have that drone, I think the drone is meta outside the game. They were aware we were setting up where we were setting up. They had guys on the hill with an M60, I believe, ready to start intercepting us. So once everyone is gathered and we start pushing through, going over barbed wire fences and going around other fences. Some of us went over to barbed wire, some of us had to go a long way around. They get up on the hill, go over the hill, do the, and then the urban combat starts. Funny enough that once I finally have a chance to start filming interesting stuff, my camera died right before I took my first hits. So I'm sorry, I don't have the full footage of our urban assault, but I do believe there is lots of other footage from people who were standing around, taking pictures, making videos, as well as the drone footage. And there was someone portraying a BBC reporter and a CNN reporter, so they should have media as well, so stay tuned for that. So I'm not a fan of urban combat, and the use of blank fire, and it seemed like maybe 2/3, if not 3/4 of the attendees were using blank fire. It did not add to the event. I do understand that to fluff up our numbers, to pad our numbers, the organizer made it open to the blank fire community so that they could have higher turnout, and it worked. I think we had a decent turnout, especially considering the COVID situation. And it was a lot of blank fire, a lot of reenactors who, I'm not saying reenactors are in the best of shape, but these reenactors are in less good shape, because while airsofters are used to being more active, reenactors generally just collect stuff and display stuff. So one of the problems with blank fire is that we don't really know where it's coming from. We don't know where it's targeted to, because it's just a bunch of noise, and we're wearing ear protection, and there's guys shooting on our side, guys shooting at our side, and if they're concealed, they're firing from a concealed position, even more complicated than us knowing when we are being shot on. At the end of the event, you have both sides complaining about how no one's calling all this machine gun fire. So that is definitely a downside from involving blank fire at these events. And it would really make more sense if it was like blank fire with the laser system. That's a whole other investment for the organizers. Or if it's purely airsoft with just a couple of guys doing blank fire for the sake of the immersions, by giving that background details of all the war noises. But otherwise, you just end up with a lot of dissatisfied people. People feeling like other side is not playing fair because they're not calling hits, you know, hits. But at the same time, it's like, we're not avoiding it on purpose. I'm sure there are blank fire targeted at me that I had no idea, because in the urban environment, they're firing from like concealment and barriers, and out in the hill, they were in the tall grass. I have no idea if anyone was aiming at me, or if the fire was friendly, or like just at my side or towards me. I don't know. But when most of the attendees are using blank fire, and we're not using that laser system, it's just more trouble than it's worth. I feel that was a negative towards the event, but in general, I had a really good time. I got my Milsim experience. The guys that complained that there wasn't enough action, I don't know. You guys were already exhausted with the amount of action we did have, and you didn't have the strength to assault the Warsaw Pact position, so we had to assault your position, and we're the ones that did all the humping because we didn't have vehicles. What's up, guys? How you know, it's like everyone was exhausted from the heat, from the terrain, but somehow it's the fault of the organizers that you had a bad time. No, this was part of the challenge. You got to embrace the suck. Milsim is embracing the suck. Milsim is getting very little trigger time with a whole lot of preparing and a whole lot of hurry up and wait and digging in and laying in wait and waiting and marching. I'm afraid that's what real Milsim is. So I got what I expected. It would have been nice to get more trigger time. There was more planned contacts by the organizers that didn't happen because of situations, but that happens to all organizers. All events usually have like stuff that they meant to happen, but they didn't have a chance to make it happen. Absolutely would have loved more trigger time, but this isn't the weekend skirmish, so I'm not disappointed that there wasn't more. I don't feel cheated. I don't feel like it was a bad event. There's natural incompatibility between blank fire and airsoft. With one, you have tactile action and response. You take your aim, you shoot at someone, they realize they're hit. That's airsoft. You take aim, you shoot at someone, you make a fireball. The person being shot had no idea they were being aimed at. And if you have to be within range of someone already seeing you when you're shooting off your fireballs, you might as well be playing airsoft, because at those ranges, you'll be able to hit them with BBs. All the popping and the banging, the fireballs was fun in the background, but at the same time, protecting our ears with Ear Pro, so it's hard to tell if the bangs are closer or farther away. In the urban environment, you're echoing. Out in the valley, sounds are being carried. Out in the plateau, sounds are being carried. It's more trouble than it's worth, in my opinion. But we do need the numbers, and the only other people that are into dressing up in 80s kits are blank fire guys. I wish these blank fire guys were more used to actually dressing up and breaking their kits in, not just owning it, putting it on once in a while and standing around and living history. Like, really own it, wear it, live it, so that when you come to the event, you're better prepared, that your feet are ready for it, that your body is ready for dealing with the kit and not destroying your own feet, being ready to deal with the heat of wearing these uniforms. It's like airsofters get stuff and then they play in it. Like, they try to play every weekend or every month. They actually play. It's more physical, whereas blank fire guys tend to be just collectors, and maybe they'll do a living history where they'll show stuff, or they will just maybe have a tactical that will just be a couple hours, and then they'll spend most of their time partying, which is fine. You know, you are free to enjoy it all as much and every way as you like it. You know, enjoy it like this, enjoy it like that. It's up to you. It's your enjoyment. And who am I to tell you how to enjoy yourself? Any way possible, as long as, you know, you're not hurting anyone else. You know, airsoft, there's a little bit of hurting. But you enjoy it, great. We'd love for you to attend more events. It's just, I would feel it would be a little bit better, a little more honest and practical if we were all doing airsoft, or we were all doing blank fire with a laser system. If at most you'd have a blank fire machine gun, where you know someone's really ripping it and throwing fireballs, it's probably at you, and really help with the atmosphere. But otherwise, I don't feel it's practical to have half or more blank fire when it's even a partial airsoft event. But that's really a minor gripe, because most of all, I enjoyed the event. I really did. Professional.